Hey, this is Mike Higman, and welcome to the Down South Hunting Podcast, presented by the Onyx Hunt app. And I just wanted to mention something about the Hunt app. I think a lot of people don't realize that there's actually a free version of the app that you can use, and it has a lot of some of the best features that the app offers. So if you haven't tried the Onyx app before, I'd encourage you just to download that free version, give it a shot. You also get a free 7-day trial of all their premium benefits as well. And I think once you give it a shot, you'll be surprised at some of the features it's got. And you don't have to get the paid version if you don't see the benefit in using that, or if you want to wait until hunting season to get that started. It's an annual membership, and it's just $30 to pay for the premium version. But I would definitely give it a shot before you pay for anything. Another thing is, you might have noticed Adam Cruz hasn't been with the podcast as much lately. And the problem for Down South Hunting Nation, for me and for all the listeners, is Adam is really good at his job, and he keeps getting promotions. It takes more and more time out of his life, and he's got to kind of reorganize his priorities. So Adam is still going to be a guest on the show some, but he's not going to be really committed to being a host anymore. So since my last day of work at my current job is Thursday, which is 2 days from now, I am going to be doing full-time entrepreneurship, and I'll be able to control my time myself. So I'm going to be charged with running the podcast solo. I'm going to focus as much as possible on bringing in some great guests so you guys don't have to listen to me over and over again. But we're just going to be a little different going forward. Hopefully you enjoy it. So in the last episode, you heard me talk to Adam that I had a hog hunt coming up, and it turned out to be pretty fun. Went with some, had a new guy with us that never hunted before, and another guy who just hunted with us for the first time last year, and we actually had success the first night. One of the guys was able to get a hog. He got set up, and we kind of circled upwind, and I'm not sure if we really bumped it or if it was just kind of funneling through where it was going to be going anyway, but it was like right after we got set up, so that was pretty exciting. I had a stalk on one. It was so dry and crunchy. I got probably within 50 yards of one, and I was within 50 yards for about 20 minutes, and it was just rooting around, but I could not take another step every time without making huge crunching noises in these leaves. I was looking for roots to step on or any of that stuff, and finally, when it got real close to dark, I started just walking through the leaves, making a loud noise, and it didn't spook like it knew what was going on, but it stayed 50 yards out, and I just couldn't get close enough. We had some mix-up with who was bringing what gun, and I ended up using a 22, and it was a good-sized hog, so I definitely wasn't going to be taking any iffy shots on it. So in Florida, it's legal. You can take a headshot on a hog like that or right behind the ear, and wouldn't be a problem, but you definitely don't want to just take a broadside shot on something like that. So it was a lot of fun. I just ate some of that hog last night. It was delicious. I know some people just leave them lay, and having eaten hog a couple times, I think those people are really missing out if they're just, basically exterminating and not eating it. You definitely should be taking advantage if maybe if it's a giant boar hog or something like that, and, it's just really stinky and nasty, I can see that case, but there's got to be some good meat even on those. Then I had my deer hunt, and long story short, I didn't see crap. So I got a bunch of good pictures, and if getting pictures of deer, put them on your wall, I'd have a great wall in front of me, but I didn't see a single deer on that hunt. I had a couple friends that were able to get some, so there were some out there. It was one of those situations again where it's super hot. The weather wasn't exactly what I would hope for as far as hunting goes. But I'm not sure that if it wasn't super cold, I wouldn't be seeing anything either, because I really do believe those GPS studies that talk about what they're moving. Wherever they were moving, I can tell you I was not. So, and I gave it a good run. I tried several different areas, and I just wasn't able to make it happen. So my season's over. I'm sure your seasons are over as well, but we got turkey season right around the corner, and I'm going to be doing my best to bring in some knowledgeable turkey guests, because y'all are not going to be getting a whole lot of knowledgeable information from me, or whatever knowledgeable information is. Anyway, I'm not going to give you a whole lot of good stuff that's going to help you kill a turkey, but hopefully I'll do a good job of bringing in some experts that will be able to do that. For all my southern states other than Florida, I do apologize. This week is a little bit Florida-centric, but I think it should be pretty entertaining for people from other states. Florida is making some huge regulation changes going into this year, and we don't just talk about the fact that they're changing. We get into the how and the why of these changes. Some of the changes going on is changing the turkey season hunting hours. We talk about bear hunting, which is a big issue that's going to be coming up. And also now there's going to be a season bag limit on deer harvest as well as a reporting system. So I know some of the other states, I know Alabama and Georgia just went through that with the reporting the last couple years, and I'm sure the other states you guys have as well. So hopefully it's something that you find entertaining if you're not from this state. We got a couple really knowledgeable guys on the topic, so I'm excited about that. Another thing is the Hunting Gear Fanatics group and the deals that go with huntinggeardeals.com, or the reviews, I'm sorry. That is coming along nicely. I got somebody working on the website, so I'm hoping to get that launched sometime in the next 2-3 weeks. I already have some great reviews from some people that have applied to the program, but I definitely can always use some more. So if you're interested in that, join the Hunting Gear Fanatics group on Facebook. And you could also subscribe to the Hunting Gear Deals email list, and I'll send some updates through that as well. If you're not on Facebook, no big deal. Something to go along with that is we are going to be having a separate podcast. I'm trying to finalize the name right now. I'm thinking maybe just Hunting Gear Fanatics, but I'm really interested to hear your feedback as to what you'd like to hear. So initially, I know for sure we're going to be doing interviews with the people that are doing reviews with us. So that should be like a pretty short podcast, maybe 10 minutes. And we're just going to kind of cover their experience with the gear that they reviewed. But Cameron, who's going to be co-hosting it with me, and he'll actually be the main host of it. I'm going to help out some. He is going to be talking to some gear manufacturers and do some more in-depth interviews and that kind of stuff. But I would love to hear some feedback from you guys and gals about what you would like to hear from a gear podcast, and maybe length and who you'd like to talk to or hear from and that kind of stuff. It'd be really good to hear some feedback. You can just reach out to me on social media anywhere you want, on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, or just send us an email at downsouthhunt@gmail.com. That'd be really great to hear from you. So this is a pretty long interview. We went over an hour with these guys, and I really appreciate you're going to be listening to it over an hour, but we had some audio issues at the beginning, and you'd think this was my first podcast again because I had an issue with hitting the record button, so we had to redo a couple things. So I really appreciate these guys sticking with me. Let's go ahead and get into the interview so I don't waste any more of your time. All right, I'm really excited to have Ian Nance and Chuck Echenique with us today, and we're going to be talking about some major changes in the Florida hunting regulations that have been going through this year. And these guys have a lot of insight into this that I'm not going to have, and I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation. Chuck, could you just start out introducing yourself? Tell us how you got into hunting, where you hunt, that kind of stuff.
Sure. I'm a sixth-generation Florida native. I've been hunting since I could walk. My dad took me out, small game, and then started deer hunting when I was about 5.5. I got my first deer at 7. I'm a pro staffer nationally with Vista Outdoors. I write for Woods and Water magazine now for 13 years. I'm a certified wildlife biologist and a hunting guide for waterfowl, turkeys, and alligators. And this is my passion. This is what I love.
And what is your involvement as far as the FWC goes? Because I know you're very involved in that. So kind of give us a summary of how you got into that and what it is.
I sit on pretty much every technical assistance group that FWC has, the Deer Management Technical Assistance Group, the Black Bear Assistance Group, Waterfowl, Quota Hunt. When we've had turkey, I've been on that one, and also on the Alligator Management Group. And basically what the assistance groups do is we represent stakeholders from different constituency groups. We take those concerns back to the agency and anything that the public wants to see done, and we vocalize that to the agency, and we're kind of like the intermediaries between the public and the agency staff, helping to direct policy and get changes where changes are required.
Cool. Ian, how about you? How'd you get into hunting? Where do you hunt? What do you hunt? And tell us about your I don't want to call it blog. It's a little more than that. Your column for the Ledger.
Sure, no problem. I was born and raised in Lakeland, Florida, and hunted and fished the state of Florida my entire life in the southeast United States. I've been writing for Lakeland Ledger's Polk Outdoors website for quite a few years now, and I got a column called Good Hunt on there. I'm also in the printed paper once a month, write for Florida Sportsman and the Florida Game and Fish magazines from time to time. Enjoy writing and sharing information with other folks, and wherever I can help out, I'd like to do so. I graduated from UF with a degree in political science, and from University of Central Florida with a master's in public administration. So I'm very interested in the management of species and the governmental aspect of it as well. And thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so I'm excited to have you. We just wrapped up our hunting season. How did your season finish up, Ian?
Overall, it went pretty well. Not as much deer hunting as I planned, but I got a nice 9-point in Nance County, and able to take my son up to North Carolina to deer hunt with him a couple times, and had fun up there. Saw bears, shot a couple does, and got into duck hunting. Duck hunting was kind of hit or miss, both literally and in a larger standpoint. And it's another fun Florida season.
Man, it sounds pretty good. How about you, Chuck?
Did well. Took my daughters bow hunting early part of the season. They were very deliberate in what they wanted to shoot, and practiced a lot of self-control on the trigger. I was able to harvest 3 6-points on public land. Put a friend of mine on his biggest deer yet on public land, and put my dad on a couple of deer. So it was a good season overall. We managed to harvest 6 bucks on public land this year, all from spots that I've hunted on quota hunt areas, and it was enjoyable for the most part. Duck season was terrible, but it's been that way throughout the Southeast for everybody.
Man, well, that still sounds like a pretty good season to me, at least on the deer front.
Absolutely.
Yeah, hopefully the Ducks can make a turnaround next year. But we have a ton of topics to go into. There were over 100 suggested rule changes to the FWC this year, and they took into consideration 57 of them. And they actually made quite a few rule changes. So the major one is we're gonna save it for the end, but that there's gonna be a deer. What is the term, Chuck?
Annual bag limit.
Annual bag limit, and also there's gonna be harvest reporting to go along
Correct.
with that. So those are 2 huge changes that have been a long time in the making. But if that's what you're most interested in, you're gonna have to wait a little bit because we have some other really interesting topics to talk about first. And the first one is involving turkey season, which is coming right around the corner. And as far as I understand, this is gonna go into effect in July, so that's not going to affect this upcoming turkey season, but the one after. But a lot of public lands are extending the public hunting hours. Right now, they usually only go till 1:00 on these WMAs or public lands, and now they're going to be extending them to sunset. Ian, I'm interested to get your thoughts on those first.
Overall, I'm pretty excited about the rule. It gives some people more opportunities to get in the woods. I've studied it raised before that it'd be easier to take kids out to go hunting, especially after youth sports might be finished in the morning or maybe in some instances after school. Public land has been open from sunrise to sunset now for a dozen years, probably or more. I think it's a good program by FWC to get some hunter recruitment going. There's some biological concerns that Chuck can talk to a little bit more. I know some hunting seasons in the past have been crafted to keep hunting pressure off nesting hens and otherwise disrupting the local flock. For instance, I hunt going to Pennsylvania, and they craft their season around where you're actually kind of getting towards the back end of gobbling, the peak gobbling time, and restrict hunters from being in the woods after 1:00 just to keep them off the hen's nest. But it's one of those things that, like a lot of things we're going to talk about, that it's probably going to work well in some places, not so well in the others.
Chuck, do you have any insight into those?
Yeah, we FWC started the pilot program on 16 WMAs about, I want to say it was 3 or 4 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than that. And we've been monitoring, the harvest success rate and hunter satisfaction on those areas. And what we found so far is that it really hasn't affected harvest much. Matter of fact, it's hardly changed it at all. But the hunter satisfaction has gone up because hunters have been able to go out and hunt when they want to hunt. Some guys can't get out there first thing in the morning. Some guys prefer to hunt in the afternoon. And so it allows them to cater to their own specific needs while still being able to avail themselves of the opportunity. And I think that what we're going to see for the most part, like Ian said, some of the areas may be adversely affected, but I think on the whole, because our terrain is what it is and our hens nest the way that they do, meaning that there's not a lot of agriculture that they're sitting on the edges of, unless it's private land. We've got hens are really well hidden for the most part during their nesting times, and most hunters don't really venture deep into those areas. It really doesn't change the behavior of the birds very much unless you're in a super high pressure area. And what we're seeing is that, I mean, birds are, because there's been so many hens that have hatched over the last 20 or so years, and the population has grown so high, it's really hard to get on birds first thing in the morning because most of the gobblers are henned up. And so it takes longer in the day for those gobblers to break up from the groups and get out on their own. So we're seeing a lot more people enjoying the afternoons because they can get on birds that have finally broken up and not have to cut off while they're still chasing a bird at 1 o'clock. It's been highly successful for me on some of those areas because I've been targeting those 16 management areas the last few years, knowing what the birds are doing, and we've had a very high success rate on our hunts.
So you said that the harvest hadn't gone up at all on those 16 WMAs. Do you think it's just like a better turkey hunting experience? Is that what they're getting out of it? Because if you're seeing more success, but there's not being more birds killed, do you think it's just less work to kill them?
No, I mean, it's still a lot of work to kill them. Don't get me wrong. Turkey hunting is turkey hunting everywhere you go, and you're going to run into different obstacles depending on the area that you're in, whether it's high predation rates in an area or you've got a lot of people using a specific area. If it's the thing about the 16 areas that we pinpointed, they're all quota hunt only. Okay. So because they're all quota hunt only, they've already got a lower amount of pressure than some of the romp and stomps do, the open public areas. And because of that, people can be more selective. They may not take the first bird that comes in. They may spend more time trying to get a specific bird because they have all day to hunt. So there's a lot of different factors that go into it. I know for me personally, speaking from what we're trying to do, as an outfitter and a guide, I do hunt a lot of public land. I have my clients draw permits, and we hunt those public areas, and I guide them and call for them. And most of the guys who come to hunt with me are looking for a trophy bird. They don't want to kill a Jake. They don't want to kill a 2-year-old with a 7 or 8 inch beard. So, we may end up passing on some birds, trying to get that bigger bird, and spending more time in the woods and more time calling birds and looking at birds gives us a better opportunity to harvest a more mature bird.
Yeah. Ian, you got anything else to add on to that after hearing about that?
No, I think I'm good on that topic. Like Chuck was saying, and I alluded to start with, that it's going to work real well in some places for different people, and other places might maybe not as well. But we'll see here. It's a good idea. I'd advocate anybody getting out there and getting into turkey hunting. So I'm on board.
I mean, as far as the population changes, I mean, I mean, this is the way it's been on private land for a long time, and it doesn't seem like there's way more birds on public than private, or something along those lines. It seems like it's gonna be tough to kill a bird either way.
I'll tell you, our hatch has been phenomenal for the last 5 years, and we're having multiple hatches every year,
which is really interesting because I know a lot of the Southeast is really struggling right now with turkey populations.
Yeah, but our turkey population is really, really holding very nicely or improving in a lot of areas. And because of that, I mean, and because of the fact that we're the only place you can get the Osceola,
yeah,
I mean, we still have a limited opportunity. There's only so many quota permits, and there's only so many days in the season, and so many outfitters that can book hunts. So, we're not really over harvesting. We're not going to kill any more birds than we already have. We just have a better opportunity to fill that harvest.
All right. So then the next topic is they decide to allow archery lasers and rangefinders, which I'm, with the Hunting Gear Deals website I run, I list a lot of deals on archery stuff, and I'm not exactly like an archery nut, but I'll be honest, I haven't even seen any of these laser sights that I guess are out there, but definitely the rangefinder. Garmin came out with the one last year, and then there's a new one by Burris this year, which, there's going to be more and more competition. I'm sure the price on those is going to come down because right now, for
they're
me,
outrageous.
It's really a non-issue. I'm not spending $1,000 on a site. It's gonna better have like heat-seeking arrows or something for me to start spending that kind of money. But what do you guys think of that? It's obviously there's a demand to be able to use those. Do you think that's a non-issue, or we need to have tighter regulations on that stuff, or what? How about you, Ian?
To me, it's a non-issue. I'm always going to lean towards the side of making the ethical kill. And if that helps somebody do that, I'm all on board. bow hunting, I'm kind of like you. I'm not a big archery nut, but it seems to be more personal. It's, hey, I'm going to do it this way, and you have a good time how you want to do it. So it's really a non-starter for me.
What about you, Chuck?
Yeah, I've been a bow hunter since I was, little kid, and took my first deer with a bow. And at one time I may have been opposed to it, but I'm actually one of the guys who brought it forth to the commission because I got a lot of phone calls from the public wanting it. And when I say a lot, I mean, a couple dozen. There were guys who were, wanting it. And so I ran it up the flagpole, and it was one of those things that was already on their radar. And to be honest with you, I don't think that anything is really going to change. It's so expensive. And you still have to be able to make the shot. And with archery, it's all about form and follow through. So no matter how good your sights are, if you're not practicing and not making those shots, you're not going to do it when it counts.
Yeah, and I'm not sure about the the laser thing. Like I said, I haven't seen any of those.
They've been out longer actually than the range finding ones have. HHA had one for a long time. I think they still make it. Basically, it's a scope with a laser dot, and those had been outlawed when they first came out in a lot of states. And the technology is old. It's really no different than in some of the newer sites that they have now with all the high quality fiber optics. So.
Yeah, and I've seen the ones on the center of the screen, or I call it a screen, but the center of the site where you'd have like a fiber optic dot that lights up.
Right.
But I'm thinking like a laser that actually you can see, like hits you, like you're lining it up on your target.
They do have those as well.
Yeah.
And I've seen those. Like I said, that's old technology. The only thing it's good for really is super low light condition if you got bad eyes.
Yeah.
You still have to sight the thing in. You still got to make the shot.
Yeah.
So it's a non-issue for me.
I think, you could be going down a slippery slope because then, you're going to stick them on guns and you're shooting 100 yards and you put a laser on whatever you're shooting.
You can put a laser on a rifle now.
And that's legal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's legal.
They've had range findings better part of 10 years now. And, I remember this conversation when those first came on the market about how it's going to change everybody's, hunting with scopes. And it's the same problem. The price point's just too high for the average hunter to get involved with those things.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, that makes me feel a little bit uneasy, but at the same time, it's not something I'm super worried about. If that's, the way.
The majority of the guys are still going to go out there and buy the Nikon Pro Staff or the Leupold Pro Staff scopes, and they're going to buy the Walmart Remington rifles because that's what they can afford.
Yeah.
And they're going to sight them in on paper, and then they're going to go out and hunt, and they're going to forget about shooting the rest of the year until something walks out in front of them.
Yep.
So if you're not practiced, if you don't use the equipment on a regular basis and know what its capabilities are, you're not going to be any more proficient.
Yeah, and really a lot of times when you're shooting, it's not a question of whether you are lined up correctly, on the target. It's more, do you remain lined up when you pull the trigger?
Exactly.
Which really, the goal is, everybody wants another hunter to be accurate when they're pulling the trigger. I don't think anybody's hoping somebody misses. So, because missing a lot of times means an injury to an animal that's not necessary. So,
exactly. I want everybody to be successful.
How about these 30 caliber muzzleloaders? Where's that coming from?
That
Chuck?
came from me.
Okay. Is that guys like making their own, building their own rifles?
No, the reason that I suggested it was last year they allowed pneumatic guns. Okay. And the pneumatic guns were at 30 caliber. Some of them are at 30, some of them are at 40. So they allowed 30 caliber and larger on the pneumatic guns. It made absolutely no sense to limit muzzleloaders when there are 36 caliber muzzleloaders out there that shoot more accurately than the 45s or the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and there are custom gun makers out there who are making 36 caliber muzzleloaders. And for consistency in rulemaking, I suggested that they do it for both.
Okay, but the air rifles, correct me if I'm wrong, I thought that was just for like small game. Like you couldn't use an air rifle on like deer.
No, you can use an air rifle on deer.
That's awesome.
Yes.
I've seen some of those videos, and that looks really cool. What do you think, Ian?
I actually just got an Air Force Texan air rifle in 45 calibers, 457. And, it is a cool toy. There's some certain limitations to it for sure, but yeah, it's pretty cool. As far as the 30 caliber muzzleloader, that's, I agree with Chuck on that. that deal. If you're getting away with it with these pneumatic air rifles, the muzzleloader, these modern days and the propellants they have, that's more than efficient.
Well, for the air rifle, don't you need like a larger caliber anyway? Like you don't want to be, obviously you don't want to be shooting like a 177 or something at a large game. Does that kind of open those up as being more useful for hunting large game?
Well, with the air rifles, go ahead, Ian.
No, I haven't taken in the woods yet. I don't want to sound like an expert on this thing yet. Like I said, I've only had it for a couple months, but there are just practical limitations to it. It's not screaming out there at 2,000 feet per second. It's still a 45 caliber projectile that's running about 1,000 feet per second. I'm not sure what the 30 caliber ones do, but there are limitations to them.
Yeah,
every
one of the
hunting hogs with them, which I'm sure you can use whatever you want for hogs anyway, pretty much. But
now, when it comes to the pneumatic guns, the rules are very clear. You have to be at 30 caliber or higher.
Okay.
If you're going to shoot big game, with hogs, I mean, they allow rimfire for hogs because it's considered small game. But
right
during, if you're going to be shooting one of those, there's a lot of different makes and specifications on these different rifles. And what you have is it's very similar to a paintball gun in that it has an air chamber. Okay, yeah. But the air chamber is extremely high pressure, and in some of these air rifles, you're getting muzzle velocities at the same rate or higher than the muzzle loaders at 1,700, 1,800, 1,900 feet per second. They're single charge, so you get one shot and then you've got to put the air back on it and charge it again. And they load similar to a pellet gun. Most of them are breech load. And you close the breech and you charge the gun. But they're extremely accurate out to, about the same range as muzzleloader, 100, 150 yards, maybe 200 yards, depending on the caliber, depending on the strength of the rifle. So there's definitely a niche use for them. Those guys who want to build their own guns or have one built for them and like to hunt with those air rifles, recoil's a lot less. And it's just a different tool to hunt with. But they're every bit as lethal, and they're every bit as reliable.
All right. So the next topic is related to duck hunting, which I'm have about zero input in because unfortunately it's not something I've gotten real involved in. But definitely in the future, as my kids grow up, I think there'll be some more time for stuff like that. But they moved the youth days for duck hunting, and I can't even remember what they were. They were, I think, maybe at the beginning of the season, and they moved one to the middle and then one to the end of the season. I'm assuming those are better times for when the ducks are moving through. Is that
the original youth season was the weekend after the regular season, the first weekend of February.
Okay, it was okay.
Okay, so it used to be the first 2 days, the first Saturday and Sunday of February was the youth season. The problem is that a lot of the birds were in reverse migration at that time. They've been hunted all season long. They're decoy shy. It's hard for the kids to shoot them. So what we did was we split it up, where the first Saturday before the season opens is now a youth day. And then the Saturday of the close split is a youth day. So the kids are the only ones who get to shoot. They get the first crack at the birds before the adults do. And, and that's where the duck hunters wanted to go.
All right. So kind of sticking with the youth hunting thing, they're going to allow, basically they're changing a youth hunting weekend for deer season, and they're putting, basically a youth can use a rifle during muzzleloader season. They're going to get, first crack with a rifle. Is that something you had gotten a lot of requests on, Chuck?
Yeah, it's actually something that we heard a lot about from different hunters. They wanted to have a youth specific weekend where the kids could hunt with a rifle before the adults did. And even though we've already got the youth exemption for, buck size, which also changed, and we'll talk about that later. There was a call for it. It was completely driven by, stakeholders and their desire to have a specific season for the kids. And on top of that, the commission voted to allow the use of dogs on private lands during that youth hunt.
Like the use of dogs, like to run deer dogs?
Yes, run deer dogs that weekend.
Kids are the only ones who can shoot. Large clubs?
Yeah, for large clubs, private lands that have the ability to run dogs, they can do so.
You got any thoughts on that, Ian?
Love it. I absolutely love the establishment of that deer season. It's fantastic work.
Did you hear any numbers or anything with that? With that making like a tremendous difference as far as like other states having the youth season? Is that like I guess the idea of it is it gets dads out with their, makes the dad go out with their kid the first weekend. For a lot of these guys that are only rifle hunters, I guess it gives the kids the first crack at it.
It does, and it gives them an extra weekend to tune their dogs up. It gets the dogs out 1 week earlier. There was some worry that maybe there would be some conflicts between muzzleloader hunters on adjacent public lands. But realistically, I mean, with the GPS collars that most of these guys are running on their dogs now, and the fact that they can cut those dogs off and get to them before they leave their private property, also with the regulation, the dogs having to be registered, and the consequences for running your dogs through private property that doesn't belong to you. Excuse me. There's a lot more responsibility in the dog hunting community, and they're doing a really good job of policing themselves and adhering to the program. And it's important for us to maintain dog hunting and to have as many opportunities as possible, because it's a lost art in a lot of places, and it's going away across the country.
Well, I actually do think that the dog hunting thing, one of those, I actually probably agree with a lot of those people that are saying there will be more conflicts. I just think by nature, dog hunting, there's bad apples in every bunch. And I think that bunch has got a few of them, and that can cause problems. But if you're talking about hunter recruitment and that kind of thing, I think that's like a whole separate group of people who probably wouldn't be into hunting if it weren't for that whole culture surrounding it. So it's not something I'm looking to, get rid of at all. And I think you're right. I think as much as there's some bad apples in that group, there's also a whole group that is really fighting, to basically, like you said, police themselves and keep that sport going. So, I'm certainly not going to group everybody together in that, but I don't think whether you have that weekend during muzzleloader or you have it during gun season or whatever, there's going to be conflicts just because a lot of those guys will tell you the dogs can't read signs. So while you may have GPS collars, it takes the owner being willing to track that dog and stop them from getting where they're going anyway.
Well, sure it does. And I mean, the reality is that most of the dog clubs are fairly large. They're pretty large clubs. And we're talking about, 40, 50,000 acres or larger. You've got to have big property when you're running walker hounds, because walkers run big. I mean, they can cover a couple of miles in a matter of minutes. And so you've got to have a good road system. You've got to have enough property to be able to work in blocks. And most of the dog hunters that I know, and I know quite a few of them, they're considerate of one another. They're considerate of the still hunters. There's a lot of camaraderie between them these days, and there's a lot of really good groups now that have surfaced that are concerned with the negative impacts of the bad seeds, and they're doing a lot to weed those guys out and to maintain their image.
Yeah. Well, and I certainly that aspect. I was really curious, like as far as like moving having the rifle days, because obviously, so let's jump into, I guess I'll finish my comment there, is I wonder how much impact that has in like hunter recruitment, like if there's a whole bunch more hunters coming in, or if that's just, an extra day for some guys with their kid,
I honestly think that, anything that we can do to make hunting more attractive to a wider base of people is a good thing, because we're losing hunters to age, and we're losing hunters to the cities and to urban sprawl. And, you got to think about it. The majority of hunters out there are my age or older. They're in their 40s, 50s, 60s. The largest generation of hunters is now becoming exempt. My dad's age, I mean, they're all retirees. They're not buying licenses anymore. They're hunting less and less because they just can't physically do it. And so our hunter numbers are going down. The good thing is that we've got a very large population of kids right now. It's one of the largest, demographics that we've ever had in this country. And if we can get those kids involved at an early age, When they do start buying licenses, you're going to see the numbers jump up again.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I wonder what if you had some kind of rule for like first time hunters, or, you know what? One thing about kids is, and I definitely am all in support of getting as many kids involved as possible, but really you need to have an adult involved as well, because a lot of these youth hunter programs, you can have them come out and they'll hunt the one weekend. Well, that kid's, maybe never going to hunt again because they don't have access to property. They don't have anybody to teach them, that kind of thing. What you need is to get these 20 to 30-year-olds who've never hunted before. You get them out the woods and they enjoy it. Well, that guy or girl can be out there every weekend. They can control it. So,
and that's what the R3 program is for.
Yeah.
Which is recruitment, retention, and reactivation. That's what the R3 stands for. And the R3 program, which Ian and I are both working on right now with FWC, is charged with not only recruiting, retaining, and reintroducing hunters to hunting and the shooting sports, but also how to gain public acceptance of hunting and shooting sports, writ large. And that's what Ian and I are working on mostly right now, is the public acceptance portion of it. But there's so many facets to this. It's really quite complex. And I mean, we have 6 subcommittees, which also have another 5 or 6 subcommittees, and we're all working on it, around the clock to try and get this stuff put together. Daniel Langston with FWC is the one who's in charge of the program. He's doing a fantastic job. But anytime you've got these challenges, you've got to try and figure out how to maximize your effort and get the most bang for your buck. And this is just one more step in getting those kids out there. And what you're saying is true. There are, hunter programs where you get kids introduced, but there's no follow-up. So we do have some hunter mentor programs that are going on. There's some private ones that are happening, and there's some that are being done through the Future of Hunting in Florida. There's a couple of ideas out there right now to start kind of like a hunter's camp to not only introduce kids, but to work them through from small game to large game to cleaning to, cooking and the whole 9 yards, and really get them in depth to it. But it takes money, it takes time, it takes volunteers.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you and Ian, being willing to step up and take a vested interest in that, as well as, the state knowing that's an issue. I'm involved with the QDMA Summit. I know that's a big focus for them, and they're trying to find out ways to, they've got programs. It's the same deal. It's nice to take somebody out once and have these programs like, yeah, we're going to, set up a day where we take kids out. But one thing QDMA is doing is they're really pushing the locavore thing and trying to get people involved in sourcing their own food and taking that as an avenue. But there's no one answer. I think you touched on that. There's no one answer to getting more involved. And, if it's an extra youth day or moving the youth day, or Ian, you want to touch on those regulations we just talked about, opening up the buck regulations for youth?
Yeah, and I know we kind of drifted off the subject here for a second. But as far as the youth and the dog hunting, that was a great addendum. But there's, in my experience with dog hunting, and it's far limited compared to Chuck, is that's a solid bedrock of the very tradition of hunting that we're trying to save here. That there are generations that go out every year and enjoy that activity. Large piece of property. Yes, they get a bum rap sometimes for conflicts with other users, but as Chuck alluded to, most places are large size properties, and you get to spend all day with the kids, with some action, with your friends and family. It's a shame sometimes that it's going away the way it is, but I do want to vouch and let people know that it's harder to find a good bedrock of tradition for hunting than with the dog hunters.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And how about those the regulations for the bucks as well, opening those up?
Are you talking about for just the youth, or are you
for
talking
youth?
about
for opening up the regulation for what youth can shoot? And I think it's pretty specific, and I really like the way they wrote it.
Well, actually, we reduced the amount.
Go ahead.
Chuck, go ahead.
Sorry, guys. I kind of left that open. Ian, if kind of give us a rundown, and then Chuck, you can fill us in.
Sure.
They reduced it down to just the one deer that's under the antler restrictions, correct, Chuck?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it used to be that youth were exempt and could shoot any deer with at least 5 inches of antler, and could shoot as many as they wanted throughout the season. Now, because we have an annual bag limit being set, And there was some instances that we found of abuse of that rule where adults were shooting the deer and putting it on the kid. We decided to reduce that to one antlered buck under, but over 5 inches and under the antler point restrictions per youth per season. And then they have to abide by the regular antler point restrictions for the zonal boundaries.
Yeah, I like that. And that's probably one of those things that's like really limiting a select few that are abusing the rule, but, better to clear it up for, LEOs to be able to enforce the rules anyway. So,
right.
Maybe I didn't remember it clearly. I was thinking it was opening it up more, but it's actually tightening a little bit. But I remember when I was reading it, I thought it was a real good idea. I'm going to skip over a couple here because I don't want to get too long. We haven't got to the real good stuff yet. I did have one thing that kind of raised a question for me, and that was Andrews WMA, which actually they're removing the deer hunts and replacing them with small game. And the deer hunts were youth hunts. So I was curious as to why you would be removing, I thought, a pretty good opportunity for youth on deer. Do you have any insight in that, Chuck?
No, actually I don't. And I've been meaning to talk to Paul Shrine on that. He's the statewide coordinator for managed hunts under Morgan Richardson. But Paul is the one who actually does the brochures and coordinates hunt dates and hunt parameters for each one of the public land hunts. It's my understanding that there were 2 youth hunts at Andrews. Yep. It's my understanding that they're still going to have a youth hunt. But what they're doing is they're replacing, it's not the youth hunt, it's the family hunts that they're replacing with small game hunts.
Oh, well, that makes more sense to me then. Okay.
Okay, so, because the family hunts were being underutilized. Right. Because you can't kill deer on the family hunts.
Right.
But you can kill hogs. But since you can kill hogs during small game, they were going away from the quota requirement on the family hunts and just adding 2 more small game hunts so that you can walk in.
That actually makes a lot of sense to me. So,
yeah.
Does that seem right to you, Ian?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. A little more sense.
Yeah, because there's 2 different, you've got family hunts and you've got youth hunts. Youth hunts is youth only. Family hunts allows one person to draw and take up to 2 youths with 1 adult. And then all 3 of them can shoot. But in most cases, they allow deer of either sex to be taken on a family hunt. But Andrews is one of those areas that because they have 2 youth hunts, 2 muzzleloader hunts, 2 archery hunts, and 1 gun hunt, they take the number of deer that they want removed from the property during those quota hunts. So rather than make a quota hunt for hogs, just make it a small game hunt because hogs are allowed to be shot during small game anyway.
All right, so we worked our way through all these other outside issues. Now let's get to the really good stuff here. So the first thing I want to talk about is the harvest reporting. And Chuck, can you kind of give us the history of like how we got to this point and maybe what some of the feedback was? Like how hard was this to get through?
Well, it was started in 2010. We began discussing different types of harvest reporting systems within the Deer Management Technical Assistance Group, which works with the Deer Standing Team run by Corey Morey. And back in 2010 until 2012, we left a lot of blood on the floor and a lot of heads split over how we were going to do it, and finally came up with a paper tag that you could handwrite and affix to the deer, have a harvest log that you keep with you, and a telephonic system that would allow you to call in harvest. And at that time, about 62% of the hunters were in favor of it. However, a couple of very well-moneyed, very well-connected folks in North Florida did not like it, got a hold of the right legislators, and at the time of the midterms in 2012, they were able to shut it down because it was low-hanging fruit. They said, well, look, this is just more regulation. We don't need more regulation. See what we're doing for you. We're ending the government regulation for you. So it got killed very quickly. And it was taboo to even speak of it for a while. But those of us on the Deer Management Technical Assistance Group kept harping at it and harping at it and harping at it. And staff really wanted it because it's a great tool for them. So within the last 2 years, it resurfaced. and it got a lot of traction, and we put out feelers for it, and we got surveys back, and about 65% of the hunters still wanted it, so the numbers had increased, and the climate was right for it. All the other states in the Southeast have a harvest reporting system of some kind. We're the only one who doesn't. We're the only one who doesn't have an annual bag limit, and they kind of go hand in hand. So the way that we decided to do it was to have three ways that you can report your harvest. You can either report it through an app on your smartphone, you can report it through a telephone number, or you can go online and actually input the information on the website. It's going to be identical to the app that Georgia uses. So it's just a matter of transferring information, querying the right information for our state as opposed to Georgia's, and populating the app so that it's customized for Florida. The great thing about using the app is that you don't have to keep a written harvest log with you, because it automatically timestamps it when you enter it into your phone and saves it. It will automatically populate the system once you hit cell phone signal if you're somewhere where you can't get a good strong signal. And anytime that a law enforcement officer checks you and you can show it to them on your phone, it shows the timestamp and it shows, what that you've reported it before you've moved it. If you don't have a smartphone, you can keep a handwritten log on the back of your license or a little logbook or whatever if you're an exempt hunter who doesn't carry a license. And as long as you write, your name, your hunter number, the date harvested, the sex of the deer, and the location where it was taken, then once you call it in within the 24 hours of harvest, you get a receipt number, and you write that on your log, and you're perfectly legal. And it's just another tool for us to be able to monitor harvest, be able to track the hunters as far as where their effort is going, what time of year, what the hunter migration is, whether they're leaving their own home areas. There's a lot of different things we can gain from it, not just the number of deer that are being killed.
I think it's great that there's so many different options for recording it. I hope that the online system is going to be glitch free. I hunted Alabama a couple of years ago, which was the first year that they had reporting, and it was a mess trying to get any kind of, the numbers wasn't working and online wouldn't work. And
Alabama devised their own system instead of using something that was already in effect, that has been used for a while. And because of that, they have all of the headaches of, writing a new system.
I do think a lot of it got worked out this season. They
did.
Ran the same system again, but of course, a lot of people are upset about it the first year because of that. I got some questions, but before that, Ian, I guess, can you kind of summarize your thoughts on that? Any concerns or anything with it?
No, Florida's been in desperate need of a comprehensive reporting service for years now, like Chuck was saying, and it's, from the outside looking into what Chuck does, it's surprising that it's taken this long, because even in the manner of crafting public policy for deer management or anything, garbage in, garbage out. We've just not had great data over the years. So I really hope this supplements it, and hunters take their roles as conservationists and game managers to report accurately and warmly on what they harvest each year, because it's only going to help them in the future.
Yeah, false reporting is bad. Not reporting is bad. We need accurate and we need compliance. Accurate reporting and compliant reporting. Most states, the ones that require it, have at the highest levels maybe 70 to 75% compliance on the reporting.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see us at a higher rate than that. And I think that the more that people get used to it and participate in it, the better it will be for everyone.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. North Carolina has a similar, program very similar to what Florida's doing here, where it has the app, the website, the phone number that you can call in and report. And it's just a sheet of paper. You carry a pen with you and write it on there, punch a little hole, 24 hours reported in. They've had it for 10 odd years. I've never really had a problem with it. And they'll actually chart what all you've taken in that state over whatever length of time. So it's kind of neat to go back through memory lane. And it's a neat tool. Like I said, I hope hunters take advantage of it.
Yeah, I think it's long overdue. I hear all this harvest data. Like I said, the QDMA puts a report out every year, and with Florida, I know that they're taking educated guesses and they're using, different WMAs and that kind of stuff where there is reporting to, basically calculate numbers of what they might be for the whole state. But to try to manage a deer herd when you're not getting any feedback is got to be really difficult for these biologists. So I'm excited that they actually have some like hard data to go off of.
Well, we actually do have hard data. For the last 4 or 5 years now, we've been using a telephonic survey. And the telephone survey, what it does is they actually call licensed hunters, and they call until they have a statistically valid response rate for each DMU. And then they've got an algorithm that extrapolates that out, and they can estimate within, on the high end, 5% plus or minus accuracy rate, on the low end, 15% plus or minus accuracy rate. Well, actually, I should say 95 to 85% accuracy. But that gives us our harvest totals statewide and by DMU and by season, whether it's archery, muzzleloader, crossbow, and also public and private lands. And so it's pretty accurate. It gives us a really good picture. But what's more important than the actual numbers of harvest is the harvest per hunter effort, because that's what we have to look at. Any state that tells you that they know what their deer population is and the exact harvest numbers is lying to you. Nobody knows that for certain 100%. But what we can do is we can track hunter effort. And when that number goes up, that means that, our deer population may be going down. If that number goes down, the effort is less and the harvest is higher, then your deer population is tracking up. If it stays the same, then your population is stable. And what we've seen over the last 10 years or so in Florida is that our deer population has been really stable, and our hunter per harvest effort has been almost unchanged.
I guess maybe they did enough surveys with that where they could basically statistically eliminate it. But I always was concerned with basically a bias into the survey, because it's not required, obviously. So who's going to take the survey? A certain type of people. And then who's going to lie when they take the survey? Another certain type of people. And I just wonder if that would be skewing the numbers. Versus, I guess with the harvest system or the reporting system, maybe you're having the same skew because, like you just said, on the high end, states are getting 75% participation. So maybe you're missing some of that anyway, but that 75% participation is a lot higher than what you're going to get out of a random survey, obviously.
It is and it isn't. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. Like I said, they have to get enough responses for it to be statistically valid. And so, for instance, in, let's say, DMU Zone B, okay? Zone B, which is its own DMU. They need to get at least 970 responses in order to, make it statistically valid. Mm-hmm. That's a high number. That's a really high number, considering there's only probably, 4,000 or 5,000 people hunting Zone B, because it's one of the smallest zones and it doesn't have a lot of open opportunity other than rich loam and green swamp.
Yeah, I got to get everybody that goes to green swamp on a Saturday.
Right. Right. So, it's one of those areas that when you start looking at getting into the numbers and really start digging into the data that they're collecting, it's actually really, really good information. It's solid information. And for the most part, the people who are willing to take the time to answer the phone and do the 5 or 6 minutes it takes to do the survey we find that they're not lying to us.
Yeah.
They're not, and they're not including other people's numbers and stuff like that. Unlike the old cards where you got it in the mail and most of them, they went into the trash. Those were, highly suspect and very inaccurate.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So I guess one other question go with the reporting is, so this kind of ties in, like you said, into the harvest limits that there's going to be. How was the decision to go with just standard reporting as opposed to like a tag system? How was that decided upon?
Well, first of all, tag system costs more money.
Yeah.
And in order for us to be able to allocate that money for tags, there has to be a way to issue the tag with the license. So either you're going to have to print the tag on the Tyvek paper and go to a vendor, or have it mailed to you, which costs more. It's not just the cost of the printing, it's the cost of the mailing and everything else. And that requires legislative approval. Secondly, it's really unnecessary with the way that the harvest reporting system is set up, where you have to log the harvest before you move the deer and then report it within a certain time frame. It still gives law enforcement officers who check you the opportunity to go back and look at that system and say, okay, I saw John Smith with a deer at WMAXYZ on Saturday the 15th, and he had written it in his log. Let me go back in and check and see if he's reported it within the time frame. If he didn't, that law enforcement officer can follow up. If he stops John Smith and John Smith has got the deer in the back of his truck and hasn't put it in his log, he can already go ahead and give him a citation for failing to follow the regulations. And the same thing would happen if he had a tag system. And the same thing would happen with people who don't report and don't get caught. You've got a tag, you have to clip it on the deer's horn or his hind quarter or his ear or whatever. Well, you put the tag, you slip the tag in and you dummy clip it. When you get home, you pull it back out, right? Nobody's checked you, no harm, no foul. Yeah. You're cheating the system. Those who want to cheat the system are still going to find ways to do it. So it doesn't make any more difference, and it doesn't make any sense to have the expense of a paper tag or a plastic tag that's affixed to the animal when the system that we've come up with works exactly the same way without the requirement.
Yeah. Okay, so finally, we talked about the deer harvest limits. We've kind of touched on it a little bit, but basically, before these changes are made, as we discussed, you could have $2 a day for the entire season.
And 2 deer per day.
2 deer, correct. But most times you're not killing does unless you have permits or specific weekends during the year. So as far as I understand, the doe weekends are going to remain similar, the same type of days. What it's going to stop you is you can't just hammer, 2 does every day of those days. Am I summarizing that right, Chuck?
Correct. Everything as far as antler point restrictions, doe days or doe weekends will all remain exactly the same as they were before.
Okay. So Ian, what are your thoughts on adding it? Overall good thing? Do you have any concerns with it?
I'm fully in support of it. It's something that's probably been needed for a while, and I made a few arguments online or wherever that it's probably not going to fit well some places and it's going to fit just fine other places, kind of like our turkey conversation earlier. Some parts of the state being restricted to 5 might feel too restrictive, especially up in the northwest part of the state. Down south, that might be too much of a harvest. But at the end, I trust Chuck and the DINTAG group and the biologists at FWC to make the call on this. We turn to them for these kind of management choices. And, if they have the information and this is another way they think that's going to help hunter enjoyment, and if they think it's going to help keep the herds balanced to the degree they feel necessary, I'm all aboard.
Yeah, I guess I can see your point with different areas in the state. I could see some places maybe in the northwest part of the state where, the depending on the area, the population could handle a little more harvest. And I agree there. I know there's some places in the south that if people were killing, every hunter was killing 5 deer, you'd have some serious population issues down there. Was the reason they went with a statewide thing? It's just a lot easier that way to implement to start out with.
Well, I mean, you have to, whenever you make a regulation, it needs to be a statewide regulation. Here's a problem with going on a DMU by DMU basis for regulation. You start really getting into the weeds and you're convoluting the regulation to the point where it's going to confuse people. There's still an ability for private landowners to be able to manage their property and harvest the number of deer that they want to. If you're willing to, if you're going to manage a piece of property to the point where you're running QDMA or you're running trophy management, and you're not going to do that willy-nilly. You're not just going to go with the statewide regulations. You're going to limit the number of harvests that your hunters have on a piece of property. You're going to specifically tell them how many does they should take, how many bucks they should take. If your deer population is that high that you need to reduce the population, you can have a certified wildlife biologist write a management plan and submit it to the deer standing team under Corey, and they will issue you tags for the number of deer that you want to specifically take off your property. And that's part of the private land management program, right? That's available to you. If you've got 5,000 acres or more, you can hunt with whatever you want, throughout the entirety of the season. You're going to harvest the number of deer specifically that your management plan has called for. So there's a way for private landowners to be able to do that still. And for the small landowners, if they combine their properties together, they can do the same thing. For those who have 650 acres or more, they can get doe tags. And so there's lots of options for you to be able to micromanage your property in the way that you see fit. But on the statewide level, it's important for us to limit the harvest to a specific number, because we do have a group of people who are harvesting, 10, 15, 20 deer a year. And the majority of stakeholders wanted several things. They wanted the doe population to increase. They wanted the overall herd size to increase. They wanted buck size and antler size to increase. And they wanted the age class of deer to increase. And so antler point restrictions and limiting doe harvest got us part of the way. An annual bag limit gets us the rest of the way.
And if you're one of those people that you don't want to go through that whole deal with getting extra doe permits and all that stuff, I usually have 3 buck permits and 2 doe permits available at the end of every season. So I'd be happy to come up to your property and help you out. downsouthhunt@gmail.com. Yeah, just
You got it.
Yeah, I'd be happy to help, and you don't have to go through the biologist or anything. So, you touched on that real quick. That's the last thing I actually wanted to talk about. So that's not a new regulation this year, but the antler point restrictions. How much of that is driven by an idea of like hunters wanting bigger antlers on the bucks they shoot versus the biology of, I understand the idea is to save the yearlings, and they want a more mature herd. But from your standpoint, Chuck, like how much of that is driven by basically people wanting more mature, or the reason they want more mature bucks is because they've got bigger antlers? Is that kind of like the idea behind that?
Well, that's the public's idea behind it. Okay, the biological reasons for it, from a deer management standpoint, is that an older age class herd has a more stabilized and pronounced rut. Okay, so when you increase the age class of the deer herd, your rut becomes more pronounced and more concentrated, and your does get bred more completely. You get a 96% or higher breeding success rate, which is important in Florida because our fawn recruitment rate is so low in so many areas. And fawn recruitment is a fawn making it through its first year of life to 7 months old, right? Surviving its first season, right? So in South Florida, in DMU A3, let's say, or A1, Zone A, you've got about a 20% success rate in fawn recruitment. Okay, so for every 10 deer for every 10 does that get bred, you've got 2 fawns that survive. One of them's a buck, one of them's a doe, 50-50. So in order for us to have that population grow down there, we have to stop harvesting does in that area, because the more does you harvest, the less fawns you're going to have, and the less fawns are going to survive. And that's due to predation. It's due to poor soil quality. But you get someplace up like D2, up in the Panhandle, and it only takes about 1.8 does to have a fawn survive. So it's a much higher survival rate up there. It's a much higher recruitment rate, and so we can harvest more does up there. Once these annual bag limits are in place, and we start monitoring the harvest rates across DMUs, we will be able to tweak and adjust those bag limits in certain areas. Areas that can withstand a higher harvest rate may get them, and areas that may not be able to withstand a higher harvest rate may have a reduction in harvest. Your statewide bag limit will still be the same. It's just that you won't be able to take them all in one DMU. Right? But you have to have the statewide regulation first before you can get down into the weeds and micromanage it.
Okay, so I keep telling you last question, but I keep coming up with stuff I wanted to talk about, and I was really hoping we could get somebody from the state to come on and talk about this. But Chuck, you're like close enough to this situation, have enough knowledge. I feel like I'm getting a good answer here anyway. What is it about the state of Florida that gives us like such low deer density? So I understand you're saying the fawn recruitment, which that's I can understand that, and you're saying soil quality. Let's say Citrus County. So there's a good amount of open land in Citrus County. And I'm sure there's a decent amount of poaching that goes there, but I have a hard time believing it's worse there than, say, some of the other states that border us that don't have the deer density issues. Is it just like the poor soil quality? It's like tough for deer to live here, period?
Well, it's not just soil quality. It's quality of habitat in general. Okay. For every acre of land, you have a certain amount of food that it yields and can sustain an animal, right? So, for instance, you look at central Alabama Black Belt, you've got deer densities of, 35 to 40 deer per square mile in much of the Black Belt. Down here, you might have 15 to 20 deer per square mile in some of our better habitat. We do have some areas that have 30, 35 deer per square mile, and they're high agriculture areas. They're, much richer soil. Deer are complex animals. They've got to have not only the amount of food that they need, but they have to have the nutrients in the food that they need in order to be able to reproduce and sustain babies. And it's not just protein and it's not just carbohydrates. There's selenium, there's magnesium, there's phosphorus, there's all kinds of things, and the copper. There's all those things that those deer need, and one of the things that we're poor in is those additional minerals. And that's what helps build body mass. It's what helps build antler mass. Once a deer's body is satisfied with its nutrition, then what's left over goes into reproduction or goes into antler growth. And so the best thing for deer here is age and nutrition. That's true everywhere across the country, but it's even more so here because our soil quality is poor, and you've got a lot of hydration issues here. The hydrology of the land changes so much from flood to drought because of our poor soil and because of the rainy seasons and the drought seasons that we have, and the sheer number of people draining water from the aquifer, that it can really affect our deer population quickly. And so there's a lot of different things that go into it, but we're all the way down here in the South. It's hotter than blazes, and we've got a lot of sandy, poor soil, and we've got to take care of our deer better than the other states do because they've got a lot more clay and they've got a lot more nutrients.
Yeah, and I'll say, my original thoughts on that stuff before I, understood this stuff a little bit better is the fact that we don't have real harsh winters in a lot of that area makes me think, well, they've got plenty of food year round. You'd think they would just continue to grow. But I think one big difference is a lot of times if you had like these northern states up in the spring, just the way like everything is like bright green and, even during the summer, there's maybe a shorter period where the some of the food is available, but when it is available, it's just ridiculous amounts versus here in the summer, in the middle of summer, that's just as tough as say the middle of the winter up there where, everything is dried up and dead depending on the rain.
Yeah.
And maybe the forage, like, yes, there's like a lot of green, but it's mature plants where, it's not palatable food where it's fresh green growth. And also they don't need to put on a lot of body weight and body fat to get them through the winter as well.
No, I mean, their body weight here comes from acorns and, high energy soft mass foods like persimmons and different nuts and berries that they can eat. American Beauty berry. I mean, it's easier to list what a deer won't eat than what it will eat.
Yeah,
because they'll eat everything. They're goats. They'll eat anything that you put in front of them for the most part. And I've seen them eat greenbrier, and I've seen them eat bark when it's been rough. But it's the difference between eating, a well-balanced diet that's high in protein and high in mineral and high in calcium and everything else that you need, as opposed to eating McDonald's fries and cheeseburgers every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll fill you up and it'll put fat on you, but it won't make you healthy.
Yeah. So Ian, is there anything I'm missing at talking to Chuck about here, or your any additional thoughts that you want to bring up regarding any of these rule changes?
I really want people the skeptics of the world out there to be patient with this. And Chuck can correct me here if I'm wrong, but wasn't there a addendum to the vote the other day saying they'll bring this whole management plan back in front of the commission in 3 years or something like that, right, to evaluate some of the elected and more stakeholder opinions? It's, Chuck has talked about how long this has taken to get done, and we've had drastic changes in the deer hunting program in the last 10 years. It's just kind of the final steps. To everybody skeptical, just wait to see how it plays out first. We need data, we need good information, and I think in the long run, it's really going to help out Florida's deer population.
Yeah, we're almost at the end here. I mean, we're going to be writing a new 10-year deer management plan here coming up, and tweaking that. After 3 years, the commissioners told us to come back and revisit this, and we may have enough data, we may not. We may need 5 years of data, but at least we can give them an interim report at that time, and show them what the trends are showing us as far as harvest rate goes. And the other thing is that we still have a few more things to finish doing. We've got to revamp the depredation permit system for more accountability there and more flexibility where needed. And there's some tweaks that we still need to do to the antlerless program, to make sure that our antlerless program is applied correctly across the state, because one size doesn't fit all. The 640 acre requirement for doe tags, right now it's, you get one tag for every 150 acres. Well, that's not suitable for South Florida. And you may be able to do more than that in North Florida, one for every 100 acres or so, or one for every 75 acres. So that's something that we're looking at now. And Corey's team is doing a great job of gathering out all that information and really, diving deep into it to see what's going to be appropriate and where.
I would love to see if there's some way we could work out where the does kind of goes more to just a general tag system and not so much specific weekends.
And that may be coming in the future.
I can see the difficulties in that too, though, because like we just talked about, if the state population cannot handle additional doe harvest and you make it easier to harvest more does, it makes a tricky situation. The flip side of that is I think it helps a lot with hunter recruitment. Most new hunters, I know back in the day, it used to be, no one would shoot a doe. I think at this point, in the evolution of the way hunters come in, most hunters would probably be happy with any type of meat, and does usually present an easier opportunity. So, I'd love to see an easier access to be able to hunt does, but at the same time, I really don't want the population in the state to suffer either.
And the biggest complication with that, Mike, is that, we have this WMA system, correct? Mm-hmm. And every WMA has its own biologist or, has a team of biologists that run specific WMAs in a region. So one biologist may be in charge. Like, for instance, Andrews has its own standalone biologist, okay? But if you look here in Zone B, you've got one biologist that manages 5 different WMAs, mm-hmm. Okay? So he or she has to take into account what is a sustainable harvest rate in each one of those WMAs. And the quota permits that are issued with that in mind, because they have to, they minimize the harvest by limiting the number of hunters going in. They know how many hunters are going to no-show in general, and they know how many hunters are going to be successful in general because of all the years of data that we've collected. And so the numbers are adjusted based upon acreage, herd size, and hunter success rate in those areas. And if we go to a tag system where you're automatically issued, 2 doe tags and 3 buck tags every year, or, 2 any deer tags and 3 buck tags, however they want to do it, you may end up having guys who say, well, I don't need to travel over to this WMA to go shoot a doe during archery season. I can do it in my backyard. And because the population is so high and the hunters start hitting it so hard, you can decimate a population of deer inside of a WMA by going to a tag system. Mm-hmm. Okay, which means that you'd end up having to have a check station there again, which is an added expense. They'd have to limit the number that can be taken out of there and monitor it every day. It's a slippery slope to go down, when right now the way that the system works has been working really, really well to maintain deer populations at each one of the WMAs.
Right. But I do think, you could separate the WMAs from, like, maybe you can't use your tag on a WMA, unless you got to have a separate
right.
tag.
There's some that you could say, no, you can't use it here because It's a quota hunt only.
Just like it is now. There's some places you can harvest does during archery and some places you can't.
Right. Right. But, again, it's already being done at that level. Adding a tag system to it will complicate it.
Right. Right.
It will. It'll create a whole host of issues that guys like, Corey and Paul Shrine are going to have to weed through that may or may not actually be beneficial.
My thought is the guy that's got 20 acres and, he can't hunt that weekend, so basically he doesn't get to kill a doe that year type deal. If he
can't hunt that weekend. Well, but he's got archery season, and he can hunt with a crossbow on his property.
That's true. That's a good point. All right, Chuck. So something that I would probably take a lot of heat if I didn't touch on this with you, and I'm really interested to hear what's going on with it. Something really controversial is the bear hunt here in Florida, and I know it's something that has come up again recently that they're starting to look at again. Can you just give me you can summarize this better than I can. Give me like a quick summary of what happened a few years ago as far as how the hunt went and came and went, and where we're at with the whole process now.
Okay. Well, I had been pushing, myself and a handful of other guys have been pushing for the bear hunt to be reinstated. And it took us about 5 years to finally get it open. So in 2015, October 2015, we had first bear hunt in over 20 years in the state of Florida. Originally, we had been pushing for the bear hunt to be run very similar to the alligator hunt, with a finite number of tags. You'd have to put in for a lottery for the license. Well, the governor's office got involved, and he decided that he wanted FWC to sell a license over the counter and just put a bag limit or a quota on the number of bears that could be harvested by bear management unit, which was, as it turned out, a mistake. Because what they didn't take into account, well, let me back up. First and foremost, we had old numbers of bear populations from 2002 and 2004 counts, which were low, very low. Mm-hmm. So the numbers that they used to set the limits,
they were low. Like not there was a low number of bears. Like they were already
they were way off. They underestimated the population drastically.
Right.
Okay. Because what happened was they went and they did these bear counts on mostly on public lands. They did not take into account a lot of the private lands that they had no access to, where the habitat was far superior to the public land properties. Mm-hmm. And so their estimated population was much lower than it actually was. They had estimated a population of around 3,200 breeding bears across the state of Florida. And that's the numbers they used. So going off of the annual mortality rate plus what they were going to harvest would be a total of 20% of the population. Okay, so if you had an estimated population of 1,000 bears, and you needed to take 200 out, and 150 of them were killed by cars or euthanized, then there would be 50 left to put on a quota hunt. So that's how they came up with the numbers for each of the bear management units. And it totaled all of 325 bears, I think is what the total harvest limit was going to be. Mm-hmm. So they opened the season, and in the first day and a half, 304 bears were killed. And in the East Panhandle, which had a limit of 40, 94 were killed.
Yeah.
So, which was one of the areas that had the worst counts because the numbers were so off and so skewed. So, of course, the anti-hunters went ballistic, and they made up a bunch of lies about cubs being killed, which there were 2 undersized bears that were shot. One was undersized by 4 pounds. One was undersized by about 46 pounds, and he was cited. And the bear was taken away from him, and he did pay penalties and fines. Mm-hmm. The rest of it was all legitimate. There were no abandoned cubs that were found. There weren't any other real problems with the hunt other than the overharvest in the East Panhandle unit. Mm-hmm. And it ended up not being an overharvest. It was just more than what they thought they should have taken.
Right. It wasn't a biology issue. It was just a number.
It was just a number issue, right? So the commissioners, at the direction once again of the governor, who at the time was running for Senate, and did not want a political issue with the bear hunt raising its ugly head and costing him an election, told them to kick the can down the road for at least another 3 years until his election was over with, and he could become senator. So they said, no, we're not going to discuss it until 2019. Mm-hmm. And we're closing the hunt down. Now, there were a few commissioners that were adamantly opposed to the hunt, and there were some that were squarely in favor of the hunt. None of those commissioners are with us any longer. They've all, well, and not because of the issue. They ran their course, and they're no longer commissioners. So we have a whole new set of commissioners now. So in the process, well, in the meantime of having all of this down, what the FWC commissioners had told staff they needed was they needed certain questions answered. They wanted an up-to-date and accurate bear count, which we did through the hair snare program. They used DNA samples to identify individual bears. We had over 300 snare sites across the state, and it was, it's very successful. We've got a very good count on breeding age bears of 4,200 is the approximate number of breeding age bears, which means
that number come out like right after the hunt ended, like
about a year and a half after.
Okay.
It was that much longer. It was a year and a half. It was late 2016, early 2017.
Was there a different number that came out right after the hunt ended? Like it was, everybody kind of knew the number was low, or at least everybody.
Well, I mean, there were some numbers floating around, but none of them were official.
Okay.
But the official number was 4,200 estimated breeding age bears. Now, when you take into account cubs, there's probably another 2,000 cubs. So you're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of around 6,200 to 6,500 bear population throughout the state of Florida. Now, take into consideration, too, that pre-Columbian numbers for the entire state, before there was a single house or any development or roads, was about 10,000 bears for the entire state of Florida at 51 million acres. We've got about 19 million acres of bear habitat left, and we've got more than half of what was there on 51 million acres.
Yeah.
So you can see where the conflicts are. All right, so after the bear hunt, conflict numbers went down. Well, we're 4 years post-hunt now, and conflict numbers are not only back up, they're exceeding where they were prior to the hunt.
Right, because which bears are the ones getting shot first? Are the ones that are like, closest to the human populations and least afraid of humans?
The bears that get shot first are the ones that are hanging out on feeders, and where the hunters know where they're at.
Although the regulation says they can't be on the feeder when you shoot them, but that one's going to be around.
You could be 100 yards away from a feeder and know where the bear's coming from and going to.
Right.
We're not stupid. We can identify the tracks pretty easily.
Yeah.
and pinpoint areas where we are legal to sit and harvest these bears.
Right.
So the nuisance reports are back up and exceeding where they were prior to the hunt.
Mm-hmm.
Which is an indication that the population is very much on the rise and growing exponentially. And, our euthanizations of bears are still at the same level. And, the trash incidents and everything else are still there, and the car accidents are still there. So the bear population is very healthy and growing. So in the meantime, the bear standing team and the Black Bear Technical Assistance Group was in the process of writing a new 10-year bear management plan. The original one was done in 2010. There's a new one, 2008. Okay. And it wasn't approved until 2012. But, the wheels of government do turn slow. So we have since finished drafting a new management plan. It should be out either this spring or summer for publication and for public comment. And then it will be ready for final rule approval probably in the December meeting back up in Tallahassee. Okay? So the commissioners will have the ability to look at it, make suggestions, and then make a final ruling before the end of the calendar year. In that management plan is the parameters for a new hunt. Now, I'm not at liberty to discuss that until it comes out for publication, but it's comprehensive, and it is involved and in the management plan that a hunt is being proposed. Now, it's going to meet with a lot of opposition. The anti-hunters are adamantly opposed to it. The bear warriors, the Chuck O'Neills and Katrina Shaddixes of the world are, mobilizing against it, and they've got legislation currently sitting in Tallahassee waiting for this new legislative session to begin next week. There are 3 different bills, 2 in the House, 1 in the Senate, to affect a possible bear hunt. One is suggesting that the bear be relisted on the endangered list for the state, and they're still trying to get the feds to list it, which they won't. because it doesn't qualify. It doesn't meet any of the markers. So the feds won't even look at it as a federal listing.
I mean, that is really just like the whole idea of that is just really shooting the whole purpose of that in the foot. I mean, that's really like I can be empathetic to people that are against the hunting, but to use a tool that's designed to preserve species that are legitimately in danger and turn it into a political tool really is not in the best interest of the animals they love so much.
Well, these folks, you got to remember, they're ruling by emotion and not by science, and they're making stuff up left and right. One of the other bills, well, the Senate bill and the other House bill both have to do with bear management and woodland management. There are measures in there to eliminate prescribed burning at certain times of the year during denning. There are regulations in the proposals for the elimination of palmetto berry harvesting completely, which is nonsense because, I mean, that's something that the bears eat for 1 month out of the year, maybe a month and a half. It's not their only source of food.
Right.
They're omnivores. They eat everything. They want to establish a board of regents or something like that will be populated by scientists and people of their choosing, who will then give the FWC either authority or no authority to do certain management practices. It's complete garbage. It'll never get out of committee, but they're wasting our time and money with this nonsense up in Tallahassee. And of course, it's being proposed by a couple of different representatives who are squarely in the fruitcake's pockets. Thankfully, this has come up every year since the bear hunt started. And every year it doesn't get out of committee. And it's basically the same thing revamped over and over and over again.
Oh man, I think this is going to be like a big national thing if once it's proposed. I mean, I think
it will be. It'll be just like New Jersey.
Anti-hunters have saw this as a huge victory, and it's not going to be just these local groups that are opposing it that are worried about bear hunting in Florida. It's going to be these national groups that are investing time and money.
They're already invested in time and money. They've been invested in time and money since the first hunt. PETA and Humane Society have donated heavily to One Protest and to Defenders of Wildlife and to the Black Bear Defenders Group and the League of Women Voters out of Seminole County, which is Chuck O'Neill's group.
Are there any hunting groups that are taking the side of legalizing the hunt?
Yes, we have several. I mean, there's the Florida Black Bear Hunters Association. There's the Southeastern Black Bear Hunters Association. You got myself. You've got the Future of Hunting in Florida. You've got United Waterfowlers.
Are there any? Maybe United Water. I'm just wondering if there's any national. Like I would expect maybe like a Sportsman's Alliance or something.
We've got U.S. Shooting Sports Foundation, SCI, NRA are all squarely in our camp on this. And if we need to combat these folks in court, we're going to have the ability to call on them for at least amicus curiae, where they can give an amicus brief to the court, and even possibly some help with legal counsel. But we've got some good attorneys who can handle that, and FWC will be advocating on our behalf as well, just like they did the last time around.
So it seems like it's a little bit of a waiting game at this point, but what can hunters do and when should they do it?
Well, you can always contact the commissioners and demand that a bear hunt be reinstated. So if you go onto the FWC website and you go into the commissioners page, there is a contact your commissioners button, and it will email all of them simultaneously. So you can write one letter and send it to all 7. You can make phone calls to the governor's office and tell the governor or send him an email that you want a bear hunt reinstated. So those are both important. Also, contact your local legislator. If you go on to the House of Representatives and the Senate sites, you can type in your zip code and it'll tell you who your legislators are and take you to their pages and send them letters. The more legislators and government bureaucrats that we can get notified that we want to hunt and flood their offices with notices that we want the hunt to be reinstated, the better off we are. Because right now we're outnumbered about 6-1 on emails, and we need to maintain pace with these folks.
Yeah. Okay. And I'll tell you, I did not participate in the first hunt, and I'm not particularly, passionate about going to shoot I have one bear hunt trail camera that may at some point have been interested in hunting. But really, like for me, hunting a bear is not like something I'm, particularly passionate about at this point. But I do believe that in the way our wildlife model is run, and that it's an effective management tool. And I do support those that really do want that opportunity. So while I personally might not be really into shooting a bear, I fully support those that are, and for the hunt in general. So I hope other people in Florida feel similarly. And I hope that if this does become like some kind of nasty battle, that the states around us, the other Southerners, would step in and help us out, because really it's, like I said, I think it's going to be a national type issue where, it's going to be setting a precedent.
It certainly will be. It's going to be right on par with what's going on in New Jersey. And one of the things, before Nick Wiley left office as executive director with FWC, he was watching New Jersey very, very closely, because they were basically test grounds for us. Now, their governor has since switched, and he's tried to outlaw it. Mm-hmm. And their wildlife commission has told them, sorry, you have no authority to do that, and we're going to maintain the bear hunt. And they have maintained the bear hunt. Especially on the federal lands up there. On the state lands, he's got some authority, but on the federal lands, the bear hunt has been maintained open, and on private lands, the bear hunt has been maintained open. So the governor's kind of out of luck when it comes to that, but we're looking at the same thing. It's kind of a test market for us, and the antis have been very unsuccessful at stopping anything up there, and they've been throwing a lot of money and a lot of effort towards it. So if they can't get it done in New Jersey, I don't see why we can't defeat them here in Florida.
All right. Well, I really appreciate that update. I'll just share some final thoughts on it and let you guys close up. But I'm a big, and Chuck, I follow you on Facebook, so I think you're probably similar in this. I want less government regulation in general. I really don't want a lot of laws and government, getting in the way of a lot of my personal liberties. But I think this is one of those cases where, giving up some of those liberties is worth the greater good. It's just like, it's worth having speed limits. Because there's enough people that would not drive reasonably, we need speed limits. I think the same thing kind of falls with this. Is it makes it more reasonable for everybody. So while I don't want, more government intrusion in my life and needing to do more things to satisfy the government, to me, it's so worthwhile for the benefits. And I'm one of those people that think that the state biologists are really looking out for our best interests. They're, I think there's a lot of naysayers out there that think the biologists have some other alternative motive. I think they want what's best for the wildlife, which turns out to be what is best for us as hunters as well. So I just want to kind of close up with that. I'm in support of all these different changes they've made, and there may be some like little individual things that maybe I personally would think are a little bit better, but I actually trust. We got guys like Chuck that are out there fighting for the hunters side of things. It's not just a bunch of idealists or a bunch of biologists that are trying to ban hunting, that kind of thing. They're really listening to what we have to say. So I really appreciate having Chuck out there with us, and I know Ian, you're sticking your nose in there some as well. So I really appreciate that. Ian, you got any closing thoughts on this?
Yeah, one thing that kept coming up during the commission meetings, and I've seen a lot on Facebook, that it kind of disheartens me a little bit, is what you talked about, the skepticism amongst these professionals at FWC who do work hard. I've met several of them, and again, obviously not the depth that Chuck has in the working relationship. They are doing their best. This is, again, I work with public policy for Polk County, and game management is a moving target coming from all different angles. FWC is not in charge of making sure every hunter's happy, but they go out of their way to try to do so. They still have to maintain the balance of these animals and their well-being. In a state that has wildlife issue challenges like no other in the South, quite frankly. So it's disheartening. I hope people participate in the reporting system. Everybody, it seems, wants to be a game manager on their 50 acres, but this is how you're going to help out, is by taking advantage of this reporting system, using it accurately and honestly, staying within your limits. I encourage folks, to really look more into this side of wildlife management. I know Chuck makes himself unbelievably available to people. I would never do so, but that's why Chuck's so good at it. And continue your education on that, not only on deer hunting, but how this stuff gets done. It's sad to see so many people get so angry. when this is something they should be enjoying and passing on to the next generation, which is something, far more valuable than killing one or two more does off your property.
Thanks, Ian. All right, Chuck, you got any final thoughts on this?
Yeah, a couple things you touched on. One of the things that really bothers me, and it's something that people need to understand and distinguish the difference. In Florida, hunting is not a right; it's a privilege, and you have to keep in mind that the state of Florida and FWC has to manage under the public trust doctrine, right? The animals belong to everyone, not just the hunters. They belong to the watchers. They belong to everybody across the state who resides here. Every animal that's wild within our state belongs to every one of us equally. And so it's a privilege to hunt, which is why we have to buy a license. And FWC has a constitutional mandate to manage and protect those resources for everyone's benefit. So when you hear people complain about, well, it's my land and I should be able to do what I want, well, that's true. And you should be able to do what you want to a point. But that point is when it starts affecting those things that are held in the public trust, you don't have a right to that anymore. You have a privilege to those things. And so we have to keep that in mind. Hunting and our wildlife is a privilege that we all enjoy. And if we're going to keep enjoying it, we got to work together to maintain it the way that it is. And the last thing I wanted to touch with is that we need to keep in mind, too, that there's one other change we didn't discuss, and that is the antlerless program in Florida. It used to be that if you were on a property that had an antlerless tags, you could shoot deer during archery season, you could shoot deer during the does during the doe days, and not have to use your tags. And then during the rest of the season, you use your tags. That's no longer the case. If you are in the antlerless program and you have, say, 1,000 acres and you get, 10 tags, or you got 1,500 acres, you get 10 tags, whatever it is, you can only kill those 10 antlerless deer. You can't kill those 10 plus everything else. If you shoot a doe during archery season, you have to use a tag. If you shoot them during doe days, you have to use a tag. So it's going to make it more difficult, and it's going to be land managers and property landowners are going to have to be more deliberate in what they choose to do. And this will also help to limit that doe harvest and make sure that we're not taking too many out of different areas across the state.
Yeah, and I think that's just one of those like no-brainer type cleaning up a loophole type things. And Chuck, they're really well said on the other stuff. I appreciate that. What is the best way for people to get a hold of you? If I know you write a column, so tell us where that's at. And
okay, well,
if somebody wants to kill an Osceola this spring, how do they get a hold of you for that?
All right. Well, you can reach me by telephone at 813-918-7610. That's my cell phone. It's on all the time. If I don't answer, I'm busy, but leave a message and I'll usually call you back within an hour. You can get a hold of me at email at huntmaster, huntmstr01@gmail.com, or at rebelyelpoutfitters.com, or on Facebook at Chuck Echenique. I'm there. I'm also got Chuck A. Echenique. So I've got two different accounts because I'm constantly in Facebook jail.
Yeah.
I told you that's
yeah. And yeah, I was a little bit worried about having you on, Chuck, because of that. but
I've got a
like,
weird
very
sense
well
of humor.
spoken, well done. Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't think you offended anybody during this
I hope
podcast,
not.
at least. So.
And if I did, oh well.
Yeah.
I'll still sleep tonight. It'll be fine.
And how about your column? Where can people find that?
I do write for Woods and Water magazine. I haven't written a lot lately, but we'll have a new column coming out next month.
All right, cool. And Ian, how can people find your stuff?
You can Google my name. It's probably easier one than writing down this long website address. It's Ian Nance, and I write Good Hunt for the Ledger. And you can email me if you need it. Nance, Nance, 880@AOL.com.
All right.
I'm still on AOL for.
Guys, I really appreciate that. I enjoyed the conversation. I enjoyed the insight. Definitely two people that know a lot more about this situation than I do. And Chuck, having your hands in it all along, it's really good to be able to talk to you about it. And
Mike, it's been my pleasure being on the show with you and being able to discuss this stuff. And your listeners, anytime any one of them has a question, they can always contact me directly because I'm more than happy to talk to anybody who really wants to learn or get involved.
All right, Chuck, you might hate me for this, but maybe you won't. Chuck is a very open and helpful guy. When I first started hunting, I was on it was popular at the time as a Florida Sportsman Forum, and Chuck was a moderator there at the time. I can tell you, I had questions about areas to hunt and what to do, and Chuck was very open with me about where to apply and that kind of stuff, which is really tough to do when you first start hunting. And I'm happy to help people out if you want to email me. But really, if you want somebody that really knows what he's talking about, Chuck's a great guy for that.
I appreciate it.
All right, guys. Well, I really appreciate it, and thanks again for coming on. And I look forward to talking to you after turkey season. See how you do this spring.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. Good luck, buddy.
Thanks. We're out down south.